Hello, this is Nathan Feinstein. Thank you for coming into this channel. I advertised as my website as Hasidic Nurses Notes. So I'm a Hasidic Jew. I consider myself. I don't have any documentation or certificates, but nevertheless, and I'm a registered nurse. But for that, I am licensed in the state of Florida and New York and others, and that's current. So I think with those two vantage points, I'm going to speak about mainly religion um, as a city Jew and kind of back it up with secular, or non-religious background, which really doesn't exist in truth. But and on top of it, this proceed I may get into topics in healthcare, which I feel relevant, especially for keeping people healthy and happy and treated fairly. So right now we're going to stay with um, more on the religious aspect of it, and so proceed using the phrase "cotton candy words." I will let you know that this presentation I originally drew up to present it to mainly a Jewish crowd, but not exclusively. But nevertheless, I think you'll see the relevance. I'm not trying to do it as an educational, Jewish or Noahide educational um, procedure or proceedings, but rather to kind of look at the place of Noachide in the politics of the world and the Jewish religion and Jewish communities. So bear with me, and but I think you'll see the points and how they're relevant, not especially not exclusively to Judaism and for Jews. I don't have a teleprompter here, so I will need help looking with my notes, and I'm trying to adapt it to this milieu of video. I initially submitted this for publication in a couple of journals. So this is called Cotton Candy Words, and why use that? Well, have you ever had cotton candy? Remember how good it looked at a party or at a carnival or some other event? And as soon as you brought it to your mouth, before you knew it, it was gone. Looked good, the color, the texture, but it didn't have much substance to it, and it sort of disappeared in a moment. Uh, Second time around, you figure maybe you'll take a bigger mouthful or pay attention to savoring it, but again, it doesn't work so well either. So why am I bringing this up? Because there's some words and sayings that carry I believe, similar description, and with them having profound meanings, like the good taste of the cotton candy, profound meanings, before they jump from the dictionary and merge into the reality of speech. After the speaker states that he's once the verbalization is its relevance is once a saying is verbalized, its relevance comes into jeopardy. But an example could be I selected humility. You ever heard a speaker say, "I'm going to present this to you with all humility"? I think the knee-jerk reaction is to pull out a dictionary and say, "What is humility? And does it apply to this person and to the subject matter?" And we might find that humility is humbled as it parts from the lips. Another example, and perhaps the main reason I'm making this presentation, is the word anti-Semitism, which has recently gained heavy publicity. I believe that the repetitive use of this concept and conduct could lessen its future influence. As described with the above examples, Though it's quite descriptive in the initial presentation, anti-Semitism's power and relevance nest primarily at that source conception. What do I mean? Well, first, let's look at the presentations, or let's look at the history. Anti-Semitism has been around for thousands of years. I don't know what words they call it in other languages, but it's that concept and that conduct is nothing new, and rarely has detailed investigation and descriptions and public awareness, evaluation, and political mechanisms cause the prevention of its reoccurrence or a rapid cessation of its manifestations. It takes its course. And similar and kind of related is that expression never again. It had a good taste, a good feel in the epoch, the time was span following the Holocaust, the Shoah. But I think it's also gone the way of cotton candy, despite all the military and political and sociological systems set up surrounding its existence to make sure never again. Unfortunately, it's never again, more like once again. Now, with all these related speeches and rallies, public forums and broadcasts and social media, I think there are like three people who are watching it for year 3.5. One, I think the predominant group are the people who know about it already. Many have experienced it, and they're getting reinforcement that they perceive this correctly and hoping that somebody else is listening and can do something about it. The second one, or even with that, once they hear this presentation, what happens once they leave the the video, the media? Is it like a football game? You watch it, you get excited, you get infected, but what happens when you leave the stadium? What are they going to do? Some will just in. The next group is the ones that we say we hope they really are listening, so they can hear these speeches and information and realize that they have a distorted point of view. Unfortunately, they are likely somewhere else or watching their own social media, which reinforces perversions. And finally, there is a group that could be listening, either through the recommendation of the leader or at a public forum, or being a good person and catching their interest. But if you just use the word anti-Semitism and present it as anti-Semitism, you might step back and think, there could be a better tool, better expression. And I saw such an expression at a parade in the United States some 18 years ago in an area where there was a large Jewish business which supported many populations, Jewish and non-Jewish. And it was an area where you didn't have a great representation in the government and in the political infrastructure. And that business took a hit, a real assault, and nearly closed down. So as a result, many people came close to or did lose their homes, their cars, or other possessions. So again, there was a sign I saw, a parade, a Lag Bomber parade. You familiar? Shortly after that, what did the sign say? First the Jews, then you. Actually, first us, then you. but still, the point still stands. If you want to make an impression on people and get them involved, I mean, there are many good people, and their empathy and sympathy is important. And it has purpose. But on the whole, you need to make the reality and not manufacture it because it's not manufactured. But the reality is, it is first the Jews, then you. I mean, look at the World Trade Center. Many, many examples, and ISIS. Look at the video played on the television. So if it's only anti-Semitism, that people may fall into the trap of a defensive mechanism of denial. And come to think, well, after the first rush of sympathy and empathy, this is really a Jewish problem, and I can probably bypass it. Similar is the exclusive focus on exposing anti-Semites and going after them and showing what they did. But it also taking that energy diverts it from paying attention to the existence and the need to recognize members of the righteous nations of the world. Who's getting the publicity? Our friends or our enemies? Who's getting the reinforcement? There's a saying that I don't care what you say about me, just make sure you spell my name right. So any publicity is good publicity for the person receiving it, no matter what you're doing. So let's pay attention and think about the people who do care. And do they exist? Well, I mean, all you have to do is look at the President of the United States. And also there's a very well-known and recognized so there's a well-known English journalist who has done a lot of research, hands-on in Israel to see what's going on. He speaks around the world and very polished speaker and very knowledgeable speaker. And then there's also famous psychologist on Texas and from Texas who has a televised program. And these are supportive people, and there are more. So we have to recognize that these people exist, and we have to stand by them and encourage others. Now, despite that fact, there is a legacy in Jewish history of people called the Arab Row, a mixed multitude. And these are the people who left Egypt with the Jews. They converted Moses, converted them. But it was like a no-brainer. I mean, they saw what God did to the Egyptians. They saw what God was doing for the Jews. I mean, the Jews didn't have any problem with all these plagues. Miraculous, right, and they're right in the midst of them, and came out with wealth. So they jumped on the bandwagon and came along. But then things got difficult. It wasn't easy in the desert, and they are credited with being the ones who instigated the golden calf, their downfall for the Jewish people. So that tradition remains. But I'm telling this to the Jewish people that we have to get past that because we have the Noachide laws, the 7 laws of Noah. And we have converts who are tremendous leaders or children of converts, famous leaders in Jewish history. The Akiva, Onkelos, who did the Aramaic translation of the Torah, and more. So we as the Jews have to get a better perspective on things and not, keep a total separation especially from people who support us or could support us. And supporting us, like anything else, is supporting everybody. Going further, the overemphasis of the term anti-Semitism implies that mankind can exclusively control the occurrences and trends in the world. Now, not even the most primitive philosophies will support that. You even have the concept of fate, which, if you look it up, there's still some supernatural, influence occurring. And one expression, best laid plans of mice and men. That the best schemes and everything like that fall by the wayside in time. And the great, brutal, you know, kingdoms, Romans, and so forth, fell by the wayside. And Hasidic philosophy, if you want to really look into it, deals with this in a book called the Tanya, which is a handbook of, you know, Hasidic philosophy, in the fourth book in the 25th chapter, about man's outlook is does what's the involvement of God in the running of the world, the universe. So we believe that, there's no place where there is not God. I mean, God, everything is within God. And not only that, that everything is by the hand of God, divine providence. So then one would say, well, what is in the hands of man? And that is that man has the ability to appropriately respond to events of life by probing for divine intent, divine involvement, and the guidance, divine guidance that was transmitted into the Torah. Again, by using anti-Semitism exclusively, who are we talking about? We're talking about people of the world, excluding God from any determination of what goes on. And another aspect, Noachide must be presented and the milieu for observance developed. It's clear in the social media now, example, the site, that people are looking more and more for God and the truth around God's existence, our relationship with Him. And we find that people are saying that they didn't get what they needed in their childhood religions. So if the Jews don't step forward and make the appropriate path available, then where will these people turn? God forbid. And Jews shouldn't think, well, if they're not going to accept our ways and they're not going to accept the old ways, and they'll become atheists. Okay, we know there's nothing further from the truth. These people are still familiar with God and familiar with Torah, the Bible, and the truth that lies within it. So we have to know that not embracing religion is not equal to atheism. And not only that, atheism is probably even worse. So what do? We have to intervene out of everybody's necessity. So let's go to the simple formula of, and this is well-founded medicine of these days that the greatest, let's say, offense is prevention. Or anti-Semitism, and everything that's developing now, is it really off prevention, or is it reacting to occurrences that have occurred, should have been stopped to begin with? Presently, what's being used? Military action, was it fragile diplomacy? Thank God we have a friendly government, and that's an exception to the rule. We can be grateful for that and recognize that. And there's debates on the social media. So these seem to be at the forefront of protecting the Jews in the land of Israel. But has it worked? Is the process finished? After 2 years of open war and an evil guerrilla faction with its political and ethnic infrastructure can still terrorize without surrendering to the two of the greatest armies in the free world. So let's recognize prevention by looking at a successful tactic of our enemies. That tactic is they have skillfully focused on the university campus. As a reflection of the education system in general, where you have the most moldable minds, influential. In that environment, you have young adults who are intelligent, capable of achieving, and full of energy, and are highly vulnerable to being influenced by the shrewdest, financially subsidized, and morally compromised educational institutions. And by the way, institutions are not just buildings, these are people. And these students now, especially in college, are away from their parents, and they don't yet, on the whole, have the tempering influences of spouses, marriage, children, and careers, which are wake-up calls that there is other priorities in life besides protesting and getting involved in political movements blindly. But these people are so well programmed that even tangible, visual, and logical proofs cannot dislodge their distorted views. Can it believe now that murder, any murder, let alone notwithstanding violent, gruesome slaughter, is now accepted as a legitimate form of protest? And so the publication education now has become an enemy of the Jews. The people of the book, can you imagine? Now, these reactions to occurrences, there are not enough courts, judges, district attorneys, policemen. Prosecution and punishment deter and suppress, but they do not nullify or positively reorient the future anti-Semites of America or the world. Education must be rewritten from the grades of kindergarten to 12th grade and beyond. Terrorist leaders advocated the raising of a new generation. I remember hearing this stated back in the early 2000s, but the time of 9/11. So now it's time for a whole generation from that time till now who have been educated in their ways and beliefs. So it's completed, and the outcomes are obviously visible, observable globally. No one's safe. Look at Europe. And note the decades of senseless murder in our public schools, clubs, churches, and shopping centers in our own country. Jews are at the forefront of the attack because they are the ones with the strongest group dynamics to recognize and to deal with hate. And they have the tools to promote justice, truth, and peace. And these are goals which are presented in the Talmud, and we find in a tractate called Pirkei Avos, Ethic of the Fathers, first chapter, 18th verse of law. So this is for all people. We need justice, peace, and truth. And who's advocating it now? So it's time for the Jews to discover and recognize our historic assets and demonstrate that the voice of Yaakov, our forefather, will overcome the hand of Esau, the enemy over the generations, the violent enemy. And since this is a Noachide channel, I will conclude at this moment saying that the Noahides are perhaps the one group who have the potential to push the Jews back into the traditional roots, traditional teachings and values. So you are essential. And you're not secondary. Believe me. I'm a registered nurse. I'm not a doctor. And I'm very happy to do what I've done and accomplish what I've done as a registered nurse and support the doctors. I don't know if I want to be in their shoes. So let's go on. I'll have to speak to you again and appreciate this opportunity.